afternoon in one city where two human rights organizations disagreed about what happened. There is just no debate, no dispute, no contention, no controversy about what the actual record shows. So let's look at what the record shows on probably the most, the issue that's most frequently discussed in the news, namely deaths, fatalities in the conflict. As most of you know, in January 2006, the Islamic movement Hamas is elected to power in a democratic election, which was certified by international officials as being carried out according to the norms of holding elections. And immediately as Hamas was elected into power, these fairly brutal sanctions were imposed on the government, first by the United States and Israel, and then subsequently by the European Union. And the justification of these sanctions against Hamas, which for whom the Palestinian people, not Hamas, paid the biggest price, the justification for these sanctions, as all of you know, is it was said that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and in order to enter the community of civilized nations, it had to renounce terrorism, the indiscriminate killing of civilians to achieve political ends. That's the conventional definition of terrorism. You're targeting civilians to achieve a political goal. And it seems to me that's a no-brainer. Terrorism is illegal under international law. It's clearly immoral. And Hamas, like any other political entity, is bound by the constraints of international law, has to renounce terrorism. That's, to me, an uncomplicated question. There are no caveats, no qualifications, except the obvious one, namely, whatever principle of international law you declare, it has to be applied across the board. If you apply it to all sides, that's called a moral principle. And if you apply it to one side, that's called a hypocritical principle. Everybody here understands that. So let's take this principle of terrorism, for which Hamas was penalized, and apply it across the board. Let's see what the record shows. Let's start with the raw numbers. Since the beginning of the Second Intifada, dating from September 2000 to the present, approximately 4,700 Palestinians have been killed, and about 1,050 Israelis have been killed. So in terms of raw numbers, it's about 3 to 4 Palestinians killed for every Israeli killed. I should bear in mind that when I'm giving the Palestinian numbers, I'm giving the bare minimum. I'm not including Palestinian children who are killed in the hospital because it's been deprived of electricity. And I'm not including Palestinian mothers who aren't able to give birth at checkpoints because they're not allowed through to hospitals. I'm just giving fatalities in clashes. The number is about, as I said, it's about 3 to 4 to 1. If you look at civilian deaths, the ratio of non-combatants, well, let me just change that for a moment. The ratio of combatants is about 4 to 1. If you look strictly at civilian deaths, leave the combatants aside, the ratio is about 3 to 4 on the Palestinian side to about 1 on the Israeli side. Well, some of you may say, okay, that sounds right, but aren't you leaving out a crucial difference? And the crucial difference usually goes something to the effect of, but isn't there a difference between Palestinians targeting Israeli civilians and Israel unintentionally killing Palestinian civilians? That's how the argument usually goes. And usually I think it's a wise strategy not to dismiss what your opponents say, but to try to systematically examine the claim for its factual and its logical strengths and flaws. Well, let's see what the results show. You have a reporter for the New Yorker magazine, this fellow named Jeffrey Goldberg. How many people know him? Not many. That's no loss. And Jeffrey Goldberg, he's a prominent writer for the New Yorker, which in my opinion says nothing. And he recently came out with a book called Prisoners. And it was about his stint of army duty in the occupied territories. And at one point, Goldberg recalls a conversation he's having with a Hamas member. And he says to the Hamas member, "For God's sake, we don't try to kill children." That's supposed to be the difference. Hamas tries to kill Israeli children, whereas Israel doesn't try to kill Palestinian children. It's an accident.